What's going on? Jake here with Uncommon EDC. Today we're checking out a few AWT scale swaps. Now I already installed all of the scales onto these three knives, so you don't have to sit through me disassembling and reassembling a bunch of knives. Apologize if that's what you came for, but there are plenty of great videos on YouTube already on how to disassemble and reassemble all three of these models. Now with that said, I'll show off what combinations I went with. We'll talk a little bit about that install process pretty briefly, whether I ran into any snags. Then we'll talk about the future of these builds, because although I swapped out the scales, do plan on making some minor changes to each of them in the future. And then finally, we'll talk about whether or not I thought it was worth it. So first, let's start with a little bit of backstory. Got all three of these knives through subscription services. We have two Benchmades and a Spyderco, all classics. But the thing about subscription services is you don't get to choose the knife that you get. Of course, that applies to the model, but also applies to the configuration. So all three of these were pretty boring, just kind of basic builds. They all had black scales, either GFN or G10. And in a couple cases, I already had variations that I thought were cooler of these models of knives. And so the goal here was to modernize them a bit. Like I said, they're classics, but they are a little bit dated, freshen them up, and give me an excuse to drop these in my pocket versus some of the versions of them that I already had. I've had my eye on AWT for a while anyway. AWT stands for Applied Weapons Technologies. They make scales for a bunch of popular models. They're 100% made in the USA, and they offer a lifetime warranty, which doesn't cover cosmetic stuff like dings and scratches that you may add to it, but if it breaks, they'll replace it, and that's the important part. Went ahead and submitted a bulk order for all three of these. Now, worth mentioning, I'm not affiliated with them, didn't get any sort of discount, so did pay full price for all of these. But let's take a look at what I went with for each. So we'll start with the Spyderco Para 2. This one came in a Going Gear box last month, and so I believe it was $198. This is the only one I know the price of because it just came, but $198, this was kind of the driving factor for me to finally order. Had black G10 scales before S45VN, replaced it with AWT's Legacy series. This one's anodized in cobalt blue. I also added that topo laser engraving, which does add $10 to the cost, but even with that additional $10, these are still the cheapest scales we're gonna see from the three knives. And a big part of that, I think, is because this one doesn't have a backspacer. Both the others have backspacers that are either anodized or Cerakote, which adds a little bit to the cost of obviously making them. But I think it looks great. Of all the designs, I think this one's the most dynamic with that topo pattern. Really just pops, and I love the shade of blue. Now with this one, I also added their milled aluminum pocket clip. I went with the black because I thought it would look good with the blue, which it does. But I realized once I installed it that I think I would have preferred the satin with that topo showing the satin aluminum in the background. And so I do plan on switching that out in the future. I will use this on another build, so I'm not going to add that to the cost of this build. But these cost $30. I'm going to order the exact same one just in satin. So the final cost of this build will end up being $100. And then we have the $198 of the knife. So we'll be about $300 in total. Now, one thing I'm happy about with all three of these builds is after assembling them, the action is either identical or even a little bit better than when I got them. And so the scales didn't really have any effect on the action or centering or anything. So bearing a little bit of the lead on that install process, but was really happy with that. Obviously cleaned them up while I had them disassembled and re-oiled and stuff like that. But all of them were either identical or improved. So really happy with how this one turned out. And next up, we have the full-size Griptillian from Benchmade. This one had black GFN scales on it. This one, I don't remember, I think this was also a Going Gear, but a while back, and I already had another version of it, which I still have and plan on doing a separate build with Met and Boss scales in the future, but already had one, and so went ahead and swapped this out with their Archon series. I believe that's how it's pronounced. Maybe it's Archon, probably Archon now. And so Archon series, this one is Cerakoted with their Tequila Sunrise colorway, and I paired that with a contrasting color on the backspacer. Now you can choose the same color. I just think it looks cool with something that contrasts it well, and I just love the way it pairs with the Aztec Teal. And so we have Aztec Teal on the backspacer, Tequila Sunrise on the scales. Absolutely killer look. And the big thing about this one is it also really improved the ergos of this knife. And that's because the original scales on the Griptillian, if you've never handled one, are pretty bulky. They're super thick. They also have this really aggressive diamond pattern texturing, which is probably the most aggressive GFN texture that I've ever felt. And so it's not super bothersome, I guess, but it is aggressive and bulky in your hand, really fills up your hand and your pocket, and isn't the greatest looking. And so super happy with the way this one turned out. Now, one thing you may have noticed is the lack of a pocket clip, and that's because AWT doesn't offer a pocket clip for the Griptillian, or I don't think any Benchmade pocket clip, so I'm gonna have to find someone else. I didn't like the way the original looked on it, so right now I'm riding without a pocket clip, but do plan on ordering one in the next couple days. Haven't decided what route I'm gonna take. I would love a matching one to this Aztec teal, but that might be a pretty big ask, so I may just go with the satin one. Now, one other thing that you may notice on this one is the partial black hardware, partial satin hardware, and that's because I ordered it with the satin. For some reason, I thought that I had satin hardware on this one, and so these two are replacement screws. They're not the same as the original Griptillian screws, but these two are the same, and so they end up not matching. Gonna order a replacement set of hardware, not a big deal, and I'll install that when I install that pocket clip. And then last but not least, we have the mini grip. We should talk about the price on this one actually. For the full-size Griptillian with the Archon Cerakote finish, it's $89.99. And so that one is a decent bit pricier than the scales, and once I add on the pocket clip, it's going to end up being a much more expensive build than the Spyderco, just because I think most of the pocket clips I'm looking at are $40 to $60 range, so going to be $130 to $150 for that build. Now, last but not least, we have the mini Griptillian, of course, also from Benchmade, and I went with the same series, that Archon series, but instead of the Cerakote, this one has the anodized finish in OD green with the FDE, or flat dark earth backspacer. Absolutely love that combo. I think it looks great together, and love the way this one turned out. You can see this one has the black blade, coated blade instead of the satin finish blade, but absolutely love the way this one turned out. This one has black hardware throughout because didn't have the replacement hardware. Also did not put a pocket clip on this one for the same reasons as the other one. Have a couple options with this. There are companies that offer milled pocket clips in FDE. I'm also looking at a bronzed titanium pocket clip that I think might match pretty well, so haven't decided 100%, but gonna leave the black hardware. I think that looks great. Do plan on making some additional changes after the pocket clip though, and that is that Glow Rhino released tritium inserts for the thumb stud. So black thumb stud, green tritium on the insert. They're sold out right now, but I'm gonna see if I can track that down. They also released the same for the access lock. So you can replace that access lock with a black titanium access lock with a tritium insert. And so we'll get rid of that satin on there. We'll still have a little bit in the liners, but otherwise we'll kind of black it out, make it look a little bit better, and I think just tie the whole thing together really nicely. Now, both of those are sold out on the Glow Rhino website, so gonna take some digging to track those down. I may reach out to Glow Rhino to see if they plan on restocking them soon, but otherwise may try and find them on the secondary, but I think that'll really put this build over the top. These ones are a little bit cheaper than the full-size Griptillian, but not significantly, $84.99. And again, you do get the matching backspacer, so also going to be a little bit of a pricier build in comparison to that Para 2. Now, as far as the installs go, the installing the scales was seamless. Some issues with disassembly, but that really has nothing to do with AWT. I started with the mini grip, didn't have any issues whatsoever, start to finish. It was probably 5 or 6 minutes, nothing too major, and that's with cleaning everything up and just kind of taking my time. I was in the middle of work while I was doing it also, so that probably slowed me down a little bit, but didn't take too long at all. Next up, we went to the full-size Griptillian. I did run into an issue with this one on the disassembly, and so you'll see that we have these 2 satin screws that I already mentioned. Those are replacements that come with the scales, and that's because it uses different screws than the original scales. It also deletes one of the screws. So if we take a look at that original Griptillian, you'll see there's these 2 screws that got replaced with larger screws, and then we have this one that gets deleted altogether. And so these 2 ended up removing no problem. The pivot removed no problem. All of the liner screws, no issues. But this screw was just free spinning. And so no matter what I did, I couldn't tighten or loosen it. It just spun there forever. It wasn't stripped. It just just spun. And so I knew I didn't need the screw anymore. I knew I probably wasn't going to go back to the other scales. So I just took a pry bar to it, pried it apart, and broke it out. I probably could have removed it from its housing once I got it out with a pair of pliers, but I didn't bother since I already got the replacement screws and I didn't need the scales anymore. And so went ahead and just kind of pried it apart. But after that, assembly was no problem. Again, all of the actions on these, centering's perfect and at least as good, if not better than they were originally. So last but not least, we went to the Para 2. This was the one with the most issues, actually. So these use these standoffs for the screws, and they're tooled on both sides. But one of them was just kind of having a hard time spinning it, which isn't uncommon because once you get one of them out, there's nothing to hold it in place from that other standoff from free spinning. Usually just with some pliers, it will loosen up and pretty easy to do. Wasn't able to do it even with the Para Knipex. I ended up heating it up with a heat gun, just like a craft one that my wife has, and then getting these like kitchen grippers that are made for opening jars, putting it around there, pinching that with the Knipex, and finally was able to loosen that up. But again, not an issue with the scales. Once I reassembled it though, the action just fell off. It was off center and it just didn't feel right. And so I took it apart, reassembled it, made sure everything was in place, polished up those washers a little bit better, and just kind of reset it. And then when I reassembled it, it was perfect. And so better action than before even. It feels amazing now. So not sure what I did wrong the first time, but was able to clean that up and get it to where I wanted it to go. So really happy with all three of these builds. I think no issues whatsoever. Would order with confidence from AWT. Again, great experience overall. But then there's the cost. So these are all American made knives. They're already somewhat pricey being that they're American made, and this is adding a significant cost to them, about $100 on the Para 2 for the final build. Once I finish up with the Griptillian, that's probably going to be around 130 to 150 additional cost. And then on the mini grip, again, it was $85, but with the pocket clip and the thumb stud and access lock replacement, it's probably going to be the priciest of all. I'm guessing we'll end up somewhere around $175 to $200 in addition to the cost. And so most people probably will think that's just not worth it. You're already paying a lot for the knife. It's putting it into some pretty crazy territories there. This one's only up to about $300, but on that mini Griptillian, we might get well over that, $350, $400. And so pretty crazy territory. For me, it was worth it though. I didn't pay full price for these knives. I got them all in subscription boxes. So you do get a discount on that because you pay less for the box and what they sell the knives for. Also, they were just kind of sitting there. My options were to sell them or carry the other versions of these knives that I already have and just let these sit in a drawer. And so for me, it was, basically the price of buying a knife. I can liven these up, make really cool versions. It was definitely worth it. But I think it's something you'll have to consider for yourself, whether or not you value that or if you'd rather just buy a new knife for that price. And so I do like some of the options that they offer. I think they all turned out looking incredible and super unique. They look different than everyone else's. They improved the ergos on both the Griptillian and mini Griptillian, feel significantly better than the original versions. And so for me, it was worth it. Now, I already talked about what those future builds are going to look like. Would love suggestions on anything that I haven't changed out yet that maybe I should consider before making an order. I probably won't do it for another week or so, just while I'm making my final decisions on what I want to order. But definitely want to do more of these build outs in the future. Let me know if you want to see the disassembly and reassembly process. For me, I feel like a lot of the times it's just kind of better to see the final product. And if you are interested, AWT even has videos out on how to do it. So I don't know that I'm really adding anything with the disassembly process, but let me know what your favorite was down in the comments below. If there's any of these that you have, what configurations you went with. Do have some others that I have my eye on for some other Benchmade and Spyderco, so probably not the last you'll see of AWT on the channel. But thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, consider liking, commenting, subscribing, joining the channel as a member, and as always, hope you have a great one. Take care.